Welcome to the discussion today of the impact of AI and academic integrity. We're going to examine and talk about intentional design. My name is Huck Stewart. I'm the Learning Design Manager of UT Online. Co-presenting with me today are Dr. Tamron Lee and Dr. Sharik Shawani. I know Sharik is a communication professor here who recently presented at the Global Polytechnic Summit this last summer on AI and plagiarism. And of course, Dr. Lee is our former director of testing at the testing center here and is our new dean of students. And a lot of his career has been looking at academic integrity and recently been investigating the impact of AI in higher education, and especially from the lens of student perspective and their impact as well. Our agenda today is as follows. We're going to be acknowledging where we're at. We're going to be imagining where we're going. And then we're going to be sharing some practical classroom approaches and conversations around academic integrity. We're going to be talking about research and insights from students' perspective. And then we're going to be sharing some examples of alternative forms of assessment and other ways that we can maybe think about assessing student learning. So let's acknowledge where we're at. Here's what we're hearing, here's what we're experiencing, here's what we're seeing. We're seeing an increase in students using AI to submit assignments and assessments. We're hearing that there is some confusion from students about where that line is as it relates to academic integrity and as it relates to using artificial intelligence. And we're also hearing that faculty are unsure if they're evaluating student work or AI work. In other words, are students actually learning what they're supposed to be learning, or is AI just doing it for them? And these are valid questions. That feeling of, am I testing my students, or is this just AI? Are they actually learning what they're supposed to learn? Might sound familiar. This is a quote from Phaedrus. Plato wrote it and was quoting Socrates when, our early educator Socrates was a person who would tell stories and share his education through verbal. And of course, the written text came out and people were writing stuff down. And this made him feel a little uncomfortable. Ironically enough, the reason we know that he said this is that Plato wrote it down. But that might feel, I don't know, familiar to some of you. If men learn this new technology, this writing, it will implant forgetfulness in their souls. That might sound familiar to a few things that we're hearing ourselves think and say about a new technology like artificial intelligence. So this is a disruptive timeline I put together. It's not to scale. I would put a banana up there for scale, but you kind of see the early written text is a disruption. Every time we have an innovative technology, it disrupts not just our educational world, but frankly, the whole world around us, right? Like every industry, even just being a human and the way we interact with humanity and living changes every time there's a new piece of technology that comes out. From the printing press, handheld calculators, audio recordings and broadcasts, and the internet and personal computers, and now we find ourselves in AI. And every time we have a disruption, this is how it feels. This is to scale, by the way. Scientifically, okay. This is how it feels to be in the middle of a disruption. Chaotic, progressive, cautious, careful, scary, confusing. It's rough. It don't feel good. And don't it just seem the way that every time we get into this disruptive thing and we kind of figure it out decades later, sometimes faster, we kind of start narrowing it down, there tends to be some new disruptive technology that comes up and makes us do this all over again. And it seems to be happening maybe a little more frequently. It's not comfortable. It forces us to change the way we think about education. It forces us to change the way we think about teaching and learning. We find ourselves, I've heard it said, in the fourth industrial revolution. And this, in this era, so before the fourth industrial revolution, I've heard it say that the only thing that we needed to really help our students achieve is being better than the machines, right? Cognitive ability remained within the domain of human. Right? To be human was to have that cognitive ability. The machines did all the automations for us. We just had to be better than that. But this fourth industrial revolution is challenging that equilibrium. We're experiencing cognitive ability-ish for machines. That's forcing us to have to change the way we think about education. I'm calling it the shift. I think we've been shifting for years. We have to think about our role as educators a little bit differently. We have to think about curriculum differently. We have to think about assessment differently. And today we're talking about the way we think about academic integrity and that shift. And here to talk about the shift, his shift a little bit, is Dr. Sharik Shawani. So I'll bring him up.
Yeah, this is one of the topics that's been front and center for all of our journeys in academia. So when I was presenting, was actually invited to present invited to do a little bit of a conversation, workshop at the Global Polytechnic Summit in Wisconsin this past summer. The focus was really on, what AI is. In my classrooms, so I just brought some experience from my classrooms. I was one of those teachers, instructors, or professors who basically jumped right into technology when specifically ChatGPT became available a little over 3 years ago. So instead of being uncertain, confused, unsure, the terms that we have heard today, the one-word descriptions, I say, what, let me just see this flipped classroom idea, this structure from the student's perspective, instead of being like pushing it, particularly kind of like monitoring it like a police officer as to where they were headed, rather basically just seeing the journey from their eyes, from their perspective. So I'm going to share some of my experiences in the classroom. First, I jumped right in, and I used to, for my assignment, particularly an applied paper, in about week 11 or 12 of the semester, they would do about a 5-page paper with the application on the topic of interest in the course I was teaching. And the final also used to be a paper. So it became very challenging initially that, how do I monitor copy leaks or something else, for plagiarism. For me, once I got, or rather became a part of the journey, I started asking them, week 1, my conversation is, as I'm going over the syllabi and all that, the conversation is, how are you using AI? Not if you're using AI, but how are you using AI? So making them feel comfortable and knowing full well that we have established this ideation that, we are using AI, and that also being transparent where and how I am using AI. So you all have a pretty good idea. I'm still in the initial stages as instructor, as somebody adopting this technology. My focus is mostly on ChatGPT and somewhat little bit because some students are using DeepSeek as well. And some of my students, I teach mostly communication classes, not performance oriented, but the students do use Leonardo, particularly for images and all that. So my experience and expertise is in these areas. So briefly, the idea is, what kind of, and also I try to distinguish in the first week, we're not going to use ChatGPT or DeepSeek as Google, because that's one of the issues with folks like me, my kind of like age bracket, because we think that ChatGPT is more like Google. It really is more than that. So basically training as you're asking questions and as it is trying to answer questions. What you input, like whatever you put in, exactly what you're going to get out. So garbage in, garbage out. Or refined, finesse-oriented, more structured, question form kind of inputs and best response that you will get. And this is where my students actually excel in this area, particularly, applying the knowledge and learning from ChatGPT and basically, learning about their own topic in a more engaged manner. This is not from my own research. This is from published research. A couple of things really important to see is that 51% of college students in the US, this data is from US, believe that using ChatGPT to complete assignments and exams is considered, even by their standards, plagiarism or cheating. Now, the corollary is, if you look at the next part, despite this belief, about 90% or precisely 89% students are using it. So they are in this very diabolical situation where they know it's kind of like not appropriate because they don't have clear instructions from the teachers or instructors. Yet they're using it, even though they're feeling guilty. So this is where I really jumped in November 2022, literally right after ChatGPT made its appearance, just like to break the dilemma of the students and guide them, not them having to feel guilty of what they were doing and how they were doing it, but just being on board, being transparent, honest, and they needed guidance. So yes, they're 18 to 22 years old, and some a little bit older, but they still need that guidance, what the expectations are. And this is where I would first tell myself and my colleagues here, and also joining through Zoom and elsewhere, to kind of like have clear expectations when you are trying to design an assignment around ChatGPT, where they could use ChatGPT and we all find out anyway, or rather having clear guidance available to them how to navigate that space and that process. And this is like a busy slide, but the focus really is on the right-hand side. We all have to decide as instructors what our expectation is, what we consider plagiarism, what we consider cheating. And the issue is a little blurry and gray because universities typically still don't have very specific policies. Utah Tech does not have. I think these are the spaces for conversations so that we can take these ideas to folks who are decision makers, and some of us are decision makers in our university's policies. So basically, we can take the voices from classrooms, like Sharik's classroom, or some student voices, or your own classrooms, and see where we fit what you consider, what the policies allow, but specifically what you consider plagiarism. So for me, it's basically the fourth, box from the top, which is this one. For me, this is not plagiarism. For me, I really want my students to operate in this area. And it requires a lot of training. And remember, I'm not teaching a course on AI. I'm very cognizant of that. And I'm very respectful of our time, of everybody's time. Like, Sharik, this is wonderful, but I cannot teach this. I have to teach math 30-20, whatever, or whatever subject you are teaching, or communication, whatever. I can't be training students in AI, but having those clear expectations and giving them ideas and approaches transparently does really help. I've been doing this at Utah Tech for the last 3 years. And for me, I've not run into these mental torturous things that we all run into. It's like, oh my God, now I have this thing being flagged, and now the student is scared. They refuse to come in. They're going to Dr. Lee's office, for these conversations, or disciplinary committee. We don't want that. Seriously, the students don't want to get into trouble, but they end up getting into trouble because they don't have clear demarcated boundaries. For me, this is my happy space. This is where I want to see my students first, to be able to have very concise, precise, and refined questions in the form of questions that they ask. And then the language learning model like AI, but like ChatGPT particularly, is able to give out an output. They can review and see how it relates to the assignment prompt that Sharik or any other professor here gave to the students, and refine it. Not necessarily summarizing the whole thing in your own words kind of thing. That's kind of like a lazy approach, like really literally engaging and asking follow-up questions, more follow-up questions, limiting the word requirements, all of those things as refined, prompts that you can provide, prompt engineering. We all have heard this term, prompts you can provide to the platform, any AI platform, specifically ChatGPT, more refined responses you will get. And like I said, so basically prompt input, good input in, good output out. Garbage in, garbage out. That's the problem. And that's the approach. And just quickly, specifically, this is, if you look on the left-hand side, this is plagiarism in AI-generated texts. One of these interesting things for me and shocking things for me was that even AI is plagiarizing. It's the way, if you think about the brain or the mind of AI, it should be engaging with this language model. However, sometimes AI can get lazy. It literally spits out without engaging with the available material and the data. Somebody literally spits out exactly as if a student, like I am cheating or a student is plagiarizing something about 20% of the time. So we have issues with AI. But remember, this is also, specifically ChatGPT, so this is still a work in progress. Even machine learning is still a work in progress. So I thought this was really interesting. And this is where we want to be. We want this no plagiarism to go from 40 to higher percentage. So just a little bit of an insight for you all. And quickly on the right-hand side of the slide, you will notice the idea is, as I was referring earlier, to make the prompts, with clarity, within the context of what you're trying to do, and providing examples and keywords so that the model can engage with itself and give a more refined output. And finally, before I invite Dr. Lee over here, some of the strategies for avoiding plagiarism in the classroom that you can share with your students. First of all, having very clear-cut instructions as part of the rubric. And secondly, making sure these language planning tasks are very specific. Chatbots, assistant, which are allowed, which are not allowed. In my classes, I allow everything, but more and more students, because I use ChatGPT quite a bit, so more students kind of like lean into using ChatGPT, which I'm happy about, but I'm still open for them to be using other platforms as well. And that doesn't really compromise your teaching, does not take extra time either. And like I mentioned earlier, so content within the context of the prompt. That's really important. And what content you're trying to generate, because sometimes ChatGPT will give you pages in output. You can cut that down very quickly. Tell me this thing with it. How can I write this within 200 words? Those kinds of prompts make your life so much easier. And of course, asking questions, going back and forth, and what systems to use and how data are analyzed. So you can kind of like look at all of these aspects and determine what works for you in your classrooms and what students struggle with and what they're happy to kind of like unafraidingly use as part of the prompt that you're providing them. At this point, I'll invite Dr. Lee to come over and share some of the findings from his own research right here at Utah Tech.
Dr. Shawani, where there's a comment in the chat from Da-Cheng Zhang that said, from answer seeking to engage dialogic thinking with AI, this is a fabulous logic shift that we as educators can encourage students to take part in. Thanks, Sharik.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Da-Cheng Zhang. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
So earlier this spring, I had the opportunity to do some research with some marketing colleagues in the business department. Dr. Catherine Davis took the lead on this research, and Dr. Chris Healy and myself also participated. We actually went down to a conference in California and presented, and it was a great experience. But the gist of our research was we wanted to find out, to do a perception study and find out where students were at, how they thought they should be able to use AI, what tasks and what types of assignments they now felt were either illegitimate or unnecessary now that AI is so powerful, right? So we structured it as an exploratory study. We used 3 focus groups, 3 different classes. One of them was online, 2 were in person, and recorded these focus groups, transcribed them. And I don't want to get into this today, but if you want more information about it, I can kind of explain our framework. We use the BITS framework and frame this around illegitimate task theory. Okay, So today I just want to give some highlights, cherry pick a little bit, give you some key findings, and then also some recommendations that we came up with. First finding was that students just want clear instructions on how to use AI appropriately. We found that they didn't necessarily, that they were using it. Definitely they were using it. And unless we told them not to use it, and even if we told them not to use it, they probably were still going to use it, right? But they didn't necessarily want to use it inappropriately. They wanted to use it within the framework that we'd set, but they needed clear instructions on how we would allow it in our particular class. They wanted to use it as a tool, not as a shortcut. Another thing we found was that they absolutely did not like online discussions. They thought it was a waste of their time. I mean, maybe you've had some of this feedback as well. Surprisingly, the online class liked online discussions because I think that was the most interactive part of their class. I mean, if you're looking at the pedagogy, maybe there's some opportunity to make those a little bit more interactive, but they liked it. The in-class, in-person students absolutely did not. And they admitted that the majority of the students were just cutting and pasting responses from AI to fill those online discussions. In talking with them, following up, they recommended, they said that the discussions were still valuable, but they would prefer having those discussions in person, in class, and they found that more valuable. Especially even those that wanted to give a genuine response, when they read copied and pasted responses from AI, they were less likely to want to respond that way. We also found that students, when they had a class that had a lot of what they would consider busy work, they were more inclined to use AI to just stay caught up. We found that they wanted it to be relevant to industry, which I think should come as no surprise, right? They wanted to use AI in the way that it's being used in industry. And they wanted to know which particular AI platforms to use for certain things, right? And I think we're not doing them any favors if industry is using AI in a certain way, and we should be teaching it that way as well, so that when they get into the industry, they'll be prepared. We found that they needed to understand the why. One interesting finding was we asked the students to reflect on their perceptions as a freshman, as opposed to there was a group of seniors. We said, okay, now think back on your perceptions of the types of tasks and assignments you were doing as a freshman. Which of those did you feel like were irrelevant, illegitimate? And then now look at how you feel now as a senior. Do you realize that some of those were legitimate? And they said, yeah, we definitely do. But at the time, we didn't understand why they were relevant, why they were legitimate. And so I think it becomes our task to explain that why. Say, we don't want you to use AI on this part of it, and this is why. Because if you do, you're going to be missing these core skills now. Later on, you'll be able to use AI in this way and explain how. But I think it's on us to explain that why. And my experience has been when we do explain the why, then they get it and they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I'll do this by hand then. I'll do this without AI, knowing that I'll be using it later. They didn't like redundancies in courses either. Like if they took a lower level course that taught a certain subject or topic and then it was reiterated, revisited in later courses, that drove them crazy. But I think, again, if we explain the why, and maybe there's some relevance to doing that and reiterating it in later courses, maybe it was necessary. I think if we explain the why, then they'll get it. Forgot to move my slide. Covered that too. All right, go to recommendations. Okay, so the first set of recommendations really came back to making it relevant for the students. If we can make it relevant, then they love it. They're all in on it. They want to know which AI platforms specifically they would use for certain tasks, and specifically which ones are used in industry. They want us to teach us how they're being used in industry. So another recommendation we had was to teach them how to ethically use AI. Have those discussions. They don't have to be long discussions in class, but if we are going to incorporate it, or if we're not, explain why and explain how they might ethically use it. Another recommendation was to adapt our curriculum to match current case studies, current trends. They loved for it to be based in reality, application based. They love that active learning, active life. Some ways I've used it in my own class are to have them create a marketing plan for a future product, a product that doesn't exist, right? So they can't really go out into AI and get information about marketing for a product that doesn't exist. So I allow them to use AI and they use it to inform their process, but they can't just copy and paste because of the way that I've structured it. For instance, one of my assignments in class is we're talking about creating like a 4P strategy. At the end of that assignment, let them go out and actually create some ad content, ad copy using AI for their new product. And that's been a lot of fun for them. They get that experience using it as a professional in the field would use it. They love the hands-on, the active learning approach. One recommendation that came from this was to teach a concept and then do some kind of active learning, whether it's small group discussions or it's actually hands-on learning, performing a task that you just learned how to do, especially if you can bring AI into it, and then using real-world scenarios. Okay, that was just kind of a tidbit of our research, but just wanted to give you a taste.
And it's just a little after 12:30. So if you give me about 3 more minutes, I've got just 3 more slides to go over, and then we'll open up to Q&A. So the too long didn't read bit of our presentation here is simply this. I think that implementing ideas to improve academic integrity is a spectrum, and I think it's not a silver bullet. And I think that there are going to be many things we're going to try that may work or may not work in your particular field or space. But from the presentation and conversations I had with Sharik and Tamron here, these are some of the things that I gathered and kind of put into a spectrum. So you don't have to implement everything all at once. You don't have to do all of this by yourself. If Zac Efron were here, he would sing, "We're all in this together." Because we're here to help and support you. We're kind of in this mess right now together. People come to us and say, "Well, what should we do?" I don't know. And I don't know, let's try this. But here's the kind of the spectrum that I kind of came up with here. At a minimum, I think everybody should go into every single graded assignment assessment, especially if you're an online instructor, and put on your assignment in text tool rules. In the courses I've been designing with folks lately, I have 3 columns and it says, okay to use, may use with citation, and do not use. And then underneath that, a placeholder that you can provide some context as to why you are allowing or not allowing those things. Tool rule expectations, not blanket statement across the entire course, but for every particular assignment. The templates that I use have that built in. Transparency is, I think, the next bit up. Transparency, I think I've heard it said in online instruction, you need to make the implicit explicit, explicitly clear. It's a little bit easier to imply things when you're in a classroom with your students. They can ask you these questions after class. Hey, is it okay to? But in an online setting, they're not going to take time to send you an email and say, is it okay to use this particular AI tool? You need to be very explicitly clear about why it's important, why you're making this decision, where students are going to use this. Give them that why. I think, Dr. Lee was saying they crave to know the why. Then providing just-in-time training on proper, ethical, effective use of AI. And this may need to be in every single assignment as well. Hey, in this quiz, you're allowed to use this AI, and this is how you're supposed to use it. This is how you can use it effectively. This is how you're going to show me if you used it. It sounds exhausting, but we're here to help. We can help you do this. And then, you can pick a few assignments or assessments that you think, you know what, I might be able to make this a little more resume applicable. This might be something that students, if I were to tweak this and make this a little bit more relevant, they could put this on their resume and talk about it with at a job interview. And then finally, I think kind of the bigger end, this does take a lot of work, redesigning an entire course, an entire program, or even just shifting the entire educational philosophy of an institution. That's a lot of work, but it happens individually, one person at a time. And you don't have to do it all at once. I have 6 examples of things I've seen in online settings that are alternative forms of assessment. Requiring online students to attend live experiences is okay. And having them document those live experiences. I have a theater professor who did this. They have to, wherever they're at, they have to find a local theater and document their experience. They have to go to it. They have to show that they went to it. Now, can the AI still show their analysis of it or do the analysis of the play? Sure, I guess. Yeah. But could students have done that without going even before AI? Yes. This is one of my favorites with coding, especially, and with spreadsheets. I've heard a lot of faculty like, well, they're just using AI to make this thing. And so I've seen an instructor do this where they record themselves doing the process, but they're intentionally making errors, mistakes along the way. Now it's up to the students to actually review that process and critique it and say what they would do differently or how they would fix it. It kind of shifts the focus on the process rather than the final product, which AI can do for us. It can make a final product for us. And then chunking end of term papers. In fact, we did this with James's course, right? Take kind of an end of term paper and chunked it into smaller pieces. This allowed for multiple interactions and feedback with students. So we got to kind of know our students a little bit more. So they're not just like, oh crap, that's due like in 2 days. I've had all semester, I haven't done anything. I guess I'll just have AI do it, right? We're chunking it out for them. Timed sort of mock career interviews where they have to record their responses in a video that's timed. So they don't have all day to do it. Just like, hey, if you were applying for this job, here's a question, 5 minutes. How would you show your knowledge based off this course or whatever? Cross-disciplinary collaborative projects. We've heard a lot of this in conversation during the convocation earlier. And then this is a fun one, analyzing news posts on websites. And not just analyzing their credibility, but also analyzing whether or not themselves as students are detecting AI-generated content or not. Starting to think a little bit more critically about that. Just some resources for y'all. We do have an institutional template that has built-in transparency in teaching and learning context and just-in-time tools. It also has an academic integrity page. You can go to Canvas Commons right now, import it into a sandbox course, and start using it in a course you may use next semester. And also, we would encourage you to come meet with a learning designer. Our job on campus is to talk to you about the problems you're facing in online courses and help you kind of work through the complexities of navigating through your particular course. So we'd encourage you to reach out to myself, and I will connect you with one of our fabulous learning designers. And then that should bring us to the end. Here's a little bit of just a cute little comic. I didn't quite lol, but I got it. I enjoyed it. And we want to thank you for your time. Now, I'd encourage you to give us feedback on this particular event. I always appreciate that.